the frequency of an authentic life, bringing heart, brain, body, sound, science, and spirit, and also discussing the inner compass. Welcome back to the Inner Compass podcast. I'm Lori Lindsay, and I primarily work with women who are in the second half of life who are ready to reconnect with themselves, to quiet the noise, regulate their nervous system, trust their intuition again, and begin living from their own inner wisdom. And today we're bringing an entire month together. Throughout August, we have been exploring the idea of living in resonance. We began with rhythm, and then we moved to the nervous system. We explored sound, vibration, the body, and the ways we respond to the world around us. We looked at science as well as intuition. We talked about healing, and underneath all of it has been one question. What does it mean to live a life that actually feels like your own? Not the life you were told you should want, not the life that looks right from the outside, not even necessarily the life you imagined 20 years ago, but the life that feels true now. Today I want to bring together the heart, the brain, the body, sound, science, and spirit. And towards the end, I'm going to introduce you to something that we'll be exploring much more deeply this fall, and that's the Schumann resonance, or the heartbeat of the earth. So settle in, take a breath, and let's talk about the frequency of an authentic life. So before we go any further, I want to clarify something. When I use the word frequency, I'm sometimes using it scientifically, and sometimes I'm using it metaphorically. Sound has a measurable frequency. Electromagnetic waves have a measurable frequency. Our brains produce patterns of electrical activity that can be measured. But when I talk about the frequency of an authentic life, I'm not suggesting that authenticity can be measured with a device or assigned a specific number of hertz. I'm talking about something more experiential. That sense of, this feels like me. Have you ever been in a situation where everything went fine on paper, but something inside of you says, no? And have you ever made a decision that was frightening, uncertain, and maybe even difficult, but somewhere underneath the fear, there was a quiet sense of, yes, this is right. That's what we're exploring. Resonance as recognition. That moment when something outside of you meets something inside of you and recognizes yourself in it. Let's begin with something science has been increasingly difficult to ignore. We don't experience life only from the neck up. Our bodies, our brain, nervous system, heart, hormones, senses, emotions, and environment are in a constant conversation. Neuroscientist and psychologist Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett has been part of an important research into interoception, the way the brain receives and interprets information coming from inside the body. So your heartbeat, your breath, the tension in your muscles, your temperature, and sensations in your tummy. The internal signals you may notice long before you've consciously decided what they mean. Barrett's work has also explored the brain as a prediction-making organ, constantly using past experiences and present information to anticipate what might happen next. So when we say things like, I felt it in my gut, my heart wasn't in it, something in me tightened, we are describing very real parts of the human body. Our inner physical state is part of how we experience the world. That doesn't mean that every sensation is intuition. A racing heart can mean excitement, can also mean fear, stress, you're exercising, you've had too much caffeine, 100 different things. That's why discernment matters. We aren't turning every bodily sensation into a mystical message. We're simply learning to include the body in the conversation. And instead of only asking, what do I think? We can also ask, what did I notice in my body? And then we have our nervous system. Researcher Dr. Stephen Porges, who developed the polyvagal theory, has spent decades studying autonomic regulation and how physiological states relate to feelings of safety, connection, protection, and social behavior. Polyvagal theory itself continues to be discussed and debated scientifically, but one thing is very clear. Our autonomic nervous system is constantly helping regulate our physiological state, and our brains are constantly learning from experience. Maybe you learned very early to keep everyone happy. Don't cause conflict, don't ask for too much, be productive, be useful, but be quiet. Take care of everyone else first. Patterns can become so familiar that eventually they stop feeling like patterns and they simply feel like, well, this is who I am. But research on neuroplasticity gives us another possibility. Neuroscientist Dr. Richard Davidson and colleagues have studied meditation, attention, emotional regulation, and the brain for decades. Their work is part of a much larger body of research showing that repeated attention and practice can influence patterns of brain activity and behavior. That doesn't mean we simply think ourselves into becoming a different person. It means our patterns are not necessarily permanent. Awareness matters. Practice matters. Attention matters. Sometimes returning to yourself begins with noticing an old response when asking, wait, is this actually what I want? That's the inner compass at work. And this month brought us to sound. Last week we explored how powerful sound can be, and I saw this very clearly in our meditation. There were longer spaces, different sounds and frequencies, moments when I invited people to listen to a sound until they could not hear it any longer. And something beautiful happened. People began talking about where they felt vibration in their bodies. They noticed sensations. They noticed silence. They noticed the exact moment the sound disappeared. They became absorbed in something incredibly simple, listening. Neuroscientist and musician Dr. Daniel Levitin has spent years studying how the brain processes music, including rhythm, pitch, expectation, memory, and emotion. And neuroscientist Dr. Robert Zatorri has studied something I find fascinating, the relationship between music and the reward center of our brains. Researchers in his lab have demonstrated that intentionally pleasurable music can engage in dopamine-related reward circuitry. So music isn't simply background decoration. The brain is actively processing patterns, anticipating what comes next, responding to surprise, connecting sound with memory, and sometimes producing very strong emotional and physiological responses. And then we have neurologist Dr. Oliver Sacks, documented extraordinary examples of music affecting memory, movement, identity, and neurological functions. And we also talked about music therapist and research Dr. Conchetta Tomanio, who worked closely with Sacks, who spent decades studying and applying music therapy, particularly with people affected by Parkinson's disease, stroke, memory loss, and other neurological conditions. That's very different from claiming that every sound heals every person. But it does tell us that sound and music can interact with the body's nervous system and brain in remarkable ways. And maybe that helps explain why listening can become another doorway into ourselves. This entire month, I intentionally brought science into these conversations because I don't believe science and spirituality have to be enemies. But I also believe that we shouldn't borrow scientific language simply to make our spiritual beliefs sound proven. There are things we still cannot measure. There are things researchers are still investigating. And there are theories that are still being debated. And then there are deeply personal experiences that may not be measurable at all. I'm comfortable holding those things separately. I can look at research on the nervous system, mindfulness, music, the brain, and the body, and still leave room for wonder. And I can say, this is what we know. This is what we're still exploring. And this is what I have personally experienced. You don't have to collapse all those into the same category. So where does spirit come in for all of this? Well, for me, spirit is the part that asks us to listen beyond performance, beyond achievement, beyond identity, beyond who the world expects us to be. It is the part that asks, who am I beneath all of this? Maybe you call that your soul, maybe consciousness, God, creator, higher self, inner wisdom, or maybe you don't have a name for it at all. The label matters less to me than the experience. That moment when you become quiet enough to recognize something deeper than the constant chatter of the mind. Sometimes that wisdom doesn't arrive in a sentence. It comes as recognition, a softening, a knowing, a feeling of, there I am. And this is exactly why I call my work the inner compass. A compass doesn't walk the path for you. It doesn't eliminate storms. It doesn't guarantee that you won't take a wrong turn. It gives you orientation. Your body provides information along with your emotions and your values. Your intuition provides information, also your lived experience. And your nervous system can influence how you interpret all of it. The goal isn't to become perfect at making decisions. It's about becoming less willing to abandon yourself while making them. So what is the frequency of an authentic life? And I don't think it's a number. I think it's a relationship between who you are inside and how you are living outside. When those two things are wildly disconnected, we often feel it. Maybe we're exhausted, resentful, restless, numbness, anxiety, a sense that we simply are going through the motions. And when they begin moving closer together, something changes. Not necessarily everything. Your life still may be complicated. There still may be grief, conflict, responsibility, fear, but perhaps there is less friction between who you are and who you are pretending to be. Maybe authenticity sounds like this. No, that doesn't work for me. Or it could be, you know what, I've changed my mind. Or I want something new now. Or maybe it's, I don't know what comes next, but I know I can't keep living this way. Or perhaps simply, this is what matters to me. That's the kind of resonance I'm talking about. I want you to think about your own life for a moment. You don't have to close your eyes. You don't have to meditate. I just want you to notice. Where in your life do you feel most like yourself? Maybe it's a particular person. Maybe it's being in nature, or when you're creating something. Maybe when you're teaching or alone. Maybe it's when you're laughing, helping someone, making something, traveling, or sitting quietly in the morning. Where do you have the feeling that you say, this is me? Now consider the opposite. Where do you feel furthest away from yourself? Where are you performing, shrinking, overriding, pretending, enduring something you've known for a long time isn't right for you? You don't have to solve it today. Just notice the contrast. The contrast itself is information. And this brings me to something we're going to talk about later this fall, because we've spent an entire month talking about rhythm, resonance, vibration, and the human experience. but resonance doesn't begin and end with us. Our planet has a measurable electromagnetic resonance, and it's called the Schumann resonance. They were named for physicist Winfried Otto Schumann, whose work in the 1950s helped mathematically describe the resonance at the electromagnetic modes. Here's the basic idea. The Earth's surface and the ionosphere form an enormous electromagnetic cavity. Lightning strikes occur around the planet continuously. Those electrical discharges generate electromagnetic waves. Certain extremely low frequency waves can travel through this Earth's ionosphere cavity and reinforce one another. The lowest Schumann resonance is generated around 7.8 Hertz, with an additional resonant mode at higher frequencies. NASA's research has measured modes at approximately 7.8, 14.3, 20.8, 27.3, and 33.8 Hertz. Sometimes you will hear the Schumann resonance described as the heartbeat of the Earth. That's what I call it. That's beautiful poetic language. It is not a literal biological heartbeat. This is where our science and spiritual descriptions become especially important. There are many claims online connecting Schumann resonance to human consciousness, symptoms, spiritual awakenings, and changes in collective energy. Some ideas are being investigated, some are hypotheses, and some belong much more appropriately to spiritual or philosophical conversations than to established science. That's the camp that I'm in. If you follow the Schumann resonance, or you follow people like Aaron Brown, who gives a daily update on the Schumann, you will start to see patterns in your life and your body that relate back to the Schumann. So I encourage you to check out Erin Brown, E-R-I-N, Brown. She's also known as Consciously Erin. When we explore this all in October, we're going to be asking, what do we know, what we don't know, and what questions are worth remaining curious about? Because the science itself is already extraordinary. We are living our entire lives inside a dynamic planetary electromagnetic environment. We don't have to exaggerate it to be in awe. So before I race ahead, I want to bring us back to where we started, and that's living in resonance. Maybe living in resonance isn't about raising your vibration. Maybe it isn't about becoming more spiritual. Maybe it isn't about becoming a more perfect version of yourself. Maybe it's much simpler. Maybe resonance begins when you stop abandoning what you know. When you stop asking everyone else who you should be. When you begin noticing what's happening in your body. When you make room for the quiet. When you learn how your nervous system responds. When you recognize old patterns. When you allow science to deepen your understanding and spirit deepens your wonder. When you listen again and again and again until eventually, underneath all the noise, you hear something familiar. You hear yourself. And we're going to keep building on that. In September, we're going deeper into the healing power of sound and vibration, exploring music, rhythm, voice, humming, vibration, science, and vibroacoustic therapy. In October, we're going to move towards the Resonant Earth with the Schumann resonance, talking about lightning, the ionosphere, Earth's electromagnetic environment, and the spiritual questions that have grown around them. But for now, I want to leave you with 3 questions. Where in my life am I already living in resonance? Where do I feel the greatest disconnect between my inner truth and my outer life? And what's one small change I could make this week that would bring me closer to myself? Not 10 choices, not an entire renovation. 1. Because an authentic life isn't usually created through one enormous decision, It's built through hundreds of small moments when you choose not to abandon yourself. I always feel it's important at the end of my podcast to talk about who I read about in forming and creating the podcast for the week. So these are the researchers and research that I dedicated myself to. First, we have Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. She is a neuroscience of interoception, perception, emotion, and the brain-body regulation. Then we have Dr. Stephen W. Porges, autonomic nervous system regulation and the polyvagal theory. Then we have Dr. Richard Davidson. He is a neuroscientist of meditation, attention, emotional regulation, and neuroplasticity. Then we have Dr. Daniel J. Levitin. He's the cognitive scientist of music, memory, rhythm, expectations, and the brain. And then we have Dr. Robert Satori. He's an auditory neuroscientist, musical pleasure, reward circuitry, and dopamine levels. Then we have Dr. Oliver Sacks. He's in neurology, music, memory, movement, and the human experience of music. Then we have Dr. Conchetta Tomato. She works in music therapy and neurological rehabilitation, music, memory, movement, speech. Then we have Winfried Otto Schumann, and he's the physicist associated with the Schumann resonance. Additional resources came from the National Institute of Health, the National Center of Complementary and Investigative Health. Then we have NASA, the McGill University, the Montreal Neurological Institute, and the Institute for Music and Neurologic Functioning. Thank you for spending this month exploring living in resonance with me. Thank you for being curious, for listening, for experimenting, for noticing your body, and for allowing yourself to wonder. If something in this month's conversation has been speaking to you, if you are in a season of life where you are ready to quiet the outside noise, reconnect with yourself, regulate your nervous system, and begin trusting your inner wisdom again, I invite you to visit my website and book a conversation with me. We'll talk about where you're at and what you're navigating, and whether the work I offer through the Inner Compass feels aligned to what you need. And make sure you stay with me in September, because we are going deeper into the healing power of sound and vibration. And then in October, like I said before, the Inner Compass is going to be looking at the Resonant Earth. Until then, remember, you don't have to become someone new. Sometimes the path forward begins by remembering what has always felt like home. Love and light to you all.